Before humans ever pressed a stylus into clay or carved symbols into stone, the world existed in a purely oral dimension. Words, stories, and knowledge survived only in the fragile medium of memory. Every conversation, every song, every instruction had to be remembered perfectly or risk being lost forever. This was a world where human thought was ephemeral, where wisdom passed only through the spoken word. In this time, there were no libraries, no archives, and no books. There were only living memory and human experience. A hunter needed to remember migration patterns of animals, a mother needed to pass down essential survival knowledge, a community needed to transmit cultural norms and rituals. All of this relied on memory and repetition, forming the foundation of what would later become literacy. Yet humans have always sought permanence. Even in the earliest days, there was a desire to fix ideas in space. Across caves from France to Indonesia, early humans left traces of symbolic thought, the earliest whispers of communication beyond speech. In Chauvet Cave, some of the oldest known cave paintings depict lions, rhinos, and horses moving across the stone walls, rendered in ochre and charcoal with astonishing detail. In Sulawesi, Indonesia, the outline of a human hand, traced in red pigment, survives for tens of thousands of years. These images were not decoration, they were acts of meaning-making, conscious efforts to externalize the mind. This symbolic behavior demonstrates the cognitive leap that distinguishes humans from other animals, the ability to represent one thing with another, to understand that a mark or image can stand for something beyond itself. Even without writing, these early marks show the human impulse to record, to communicate, and to preserve thought across time. The first symbolic expressions were more than art, they were attempts to bridge the invisible world of thought with the visible world of matter. Handprints, painted animals, geometric shapes, these were proto-messages, intended to convey information, ideas, and perhaps even emotions. These marks laid the groundwork for the next stage of human communication. From these earliest impressions in stone and pigment emerged the idea that thought could outlive its originator, that memory could exist beyond the mind. Writing, in its essence, is this very impulse made permanent. In this silent prehistory, humans began to imagine a world in which ideas could be fixed, stored, and transmitted, creating the mental foundation for the invention of writing itself. This was the first step toward history, the first conscious effort to capture the intangible in tangible form. The birth of writing begins not with clay or stylus but in the human mind. Long before humans carved symbols into stone or pressed marks into clay, they achieved a profound cognitive breakthrough, the ability to think symbolically. Symbolic thought is the capacity to let one thing stand for another, to see the world not only as it is, but as it could be represented. A circle might mean the sun. A spiral etched into a bone might symbolize the cycle of life. A red handprint on a cave wall might declare presence, identity, or belonging. These early forms of abstraction, simple as they seem, represent a leap in human cognition, a mental bridge between perception and communication. Between 70,000 and 40,000 years ago, humans began leaving evidence of abstract thinking in caves, burial sites, and personal ornaments. In Europe, the Chauvet and Lascaux caves reveal animals rendered in perspective, with careful attention to movement, size, and form. These were not mere decorations, they were conscious attempts to communicate ideas, to preserve knowledge, and perhaps to convey meaning to others beyond the moment. In Indonesia, hand stencils, sometimes accompanied by symbolic dots or geometric shapes, survive on cave walls. These markings suggest that even tens of thousands of years ago, humans were experimenting with the concept of representation, turning fleeting thoughts into physical symbols. This cognitive leap had practical consequences. By externalizing thought, humans could plan, communicate, and reflect in ways that were impossible with memory alone. Symbols allowed for shared understanding across individuals and time. A mark could represent a successful hunt, a sacred ritual, or a warning. Through repeated use, certain symbols would carry conventionalized meaning within a group, creating the earliest forms of a symbolic language. This ability to abstract, codify, and communicate ideas visually laid the groundwork for proto-writing. What is particularly remarkable is that these early humans were engaging in what modern psychologists call metacognition, the ability to think about thinking. To create a symbol for an idea requires understanding both the concept and the need to communicate it. A red handprint on a cave wall was not only an act of art, it was a declaration, "I was here," or "we exist." The act of representation implies self-awareness, memory, and social consciousness. In short, humans were beginning to see themselves as agents in a larger network of thought, capable of influencing others across space and time. Moreover, symbolic thought laid the foundation for complex culture and social organization. Communities could coordinate hunts, remember seasonal changes, and transmit knowledge about tools, food, and ritual practices. Symbols also had a spiritual dimension, enabling early humans to connect with forces they did not fully understand, the cycles of nature, the mysteries of life and death, and the presence of unseen powers. These symbolic frameworks were essential not only for survival but also for the emergence of culture, giving meaning to human experience and establishing the basis for shared knowledge. In essence, symbolic thought was humanity's first step toward writing. It represented the externalization of memory, the ability to capture ideas beyond the limits of immediate experience. Without this cognitive leap, there could be no record-keeping, no administration, no literature. Humans had to first understand that a mark could represent something absent, a concept, a quantity, or even an emotion. Only then could these marks evolve into a system capable of conveying full speech, the birth of writing itself. From cave walls to carved bones, from abstract marks to structured symbols, this period represents the mental revolution of our species. Humans were learning to see not only the world but their own minds as something that could be recorded, transmitted, and preserved. This is the cognitive foundation upon which all writing, and indeed all history, would be built. The leap from symbolic thought to proto-writing was a subtle yet revolutionary shift. Early humans, having developed the ability to abstract ideas into symbols, began using those symbols for practical purposes, particularly to record quantities, ownership, and important events. While these marks were not writing in the modern sense, they were the first conscious efforts to fix thought in a durable medium, bridging the gap between memory and recorded history. One of the most famous examples of early proto-writing is the Ishango bone, discovered near the headwaters of the Nile and dated to around 20,000 BCE. This small bone, carved with a series of notches, appears to represent a counting system, possibly related to lunar cycles, arithmetic operations, or even early calendars. Similar tally sticks and marked stones have been found across Africa and Europe, indicating that early humans were experimenting with ways to externalize numerical information. These marks were not decorative, they were tools, used to remember, calculate, and communicate. Proto-writing was inherently practical. It served as a memory aid for activities that were essential to survival. Hunters could track the number of prey captured, farmers could record seasonal harvests, community leaders could note obligations, debts, or distributions of resources. In these early societies, memory alone could not sustain growing complexity, and symbols became indispensable. By marking objects, humans could extend cognition beyond the limitations of the human brain, creating a tangible record of agreements, quantities, and events. Interestingly, proto-writing was not confined to numbers. Archaeologists have discovered abstract geometric signs, circles, crosses, triangles, and zigzags, etched into bones, clay, and stone. While their precise meanings remain debated, these marks likely conveyed concepts, categories, or messages understood by their contemporary users. In this way, proto-writing represents an essential step. Humans were no longer merely recording observations, they were encoding information. Each mark carried intended meaning, creating the early foundations for full linguistic representation. The cognitive sophistication of proto-writing becomes even clearer when we examine the transition to standardized systems. Over thousands of years, certain communities began to repeat specific marks consistently, transforming ad hoc symbols into shared conventions. This standardization allowed communication to transcend individual experience. A symbol drawn by one person could be understood by another, even if they were separated by time or space. In essence, proto-writing began to form a language of symbols, where each mark had a conventionalized meaning recognized by the community. Proto-writing also illustrates the interplay between function and creativity. Marks were initially utilitarian, designed for counting, tracking, or categorizing. Yet even within these constraints, early humans displayed artistic ingenuity, crafting signs with intentional form, rhythm, and placement. The aesthetic dimension of these marks was not merely decorative, it reinforced clarity, memorability, and social recognition, making the system more effective for communication. By the end of the Neolithic era, proto-writing had laid the groundwork for true scripts. Communities were no longer solely reliant on spoken memory, they had discovered a method to externalize knowledge and ensure continuity. These early marks, whether etched in bone, carved into stone, or pressed into clay, represent humanity's first conscious effort to preserve thought beyond the lifespan of an individual. In this period, we witness the transformation of human cognition into tangible, communicable, and enduring forms. Proto-writing is not merely a technical innovation, it is a reflection of humans' desire to impose order on experience, to make sense of the world, and to communicate that understanding across time. Every etched notch or drawn symbol was a step toward civilization itself, the earliest, most fragile bridge from memory to history. The emergence of proto-writing coincided with one of the most transformative periods in human history, the transition from nomadic life to permanent settlement. Around 10,000 BCE, the last ice age receded, and a warmer, more stable climate allowed humans to cultivate crops and domesticate animals. In the Fertile Crescent, the arc of land stretching from Mesopotamia through modern-day Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, small communities began to settle along rivers, giving rise to the first villages. With this shift, humans faced new challenges and opportunities that would shape the invention of writing. Settled life required more complex social and economic organization than nomadic hunting and gathering. Crops needed planting, harvesting, and storage, herds required care and tracking, trade emerged, connecting communities across distances. A small village might consist of hundreds of people, each with roles and responsibilities. Memory alone could no longer sustain such intricate systems. There arose a need for reliable methods to track resources, obligations, and exchanges. This was the context in which writing began to take root, as a practical solution to real-world problems. Villages like Jericho, one of the oldest known settlements, and Catalhoyuk, in modern-day Turkey, exemplify this transformation. These early towns were organized with streets, homes, and communal spaces, suggesting centralized planning and cooperation. Farmers stored surplus grain in communal silos, a step that introduced the need for accounting and record-keeping. Who contributed what to the storehouse? How much was allocated to each household? How could leaders ensure fairness and prevent disputes? Without a written record, these questions relied solely on human memory, a fragile and fallible system. The earliest solution was remarkably simple. Humans began using tokens, marks, and symbols to represent quantities and transactions. Clay tokens, often shaped as cones, spheres, or discs, served as tangible representations of goods. A cone might represent a measure of grain, a sphere might represent a jar of oil. These tokens could be counted, grouped, and stored, acting as a physical ledger for the community. They were in essence, the first instruments of bureaucracy, allowing societies to track resources and obligations beyond the limits of memory. As villages grew, so did the complexity of administration. Surplus food and trade created the need for contracts and agreements. Ownership had to be proven, debts had to be recorded. Leaders needed to communicate instructions to distant fields, workshops, or neighboring settlements. These logistical demands created a fertile environment for the development of more sophisticated symbolic systems. Writing would emerge not as a philosophical luxury, but as a practical necessity for survival and social cohesion. Settled life also brought about social hierarchies and specialization. Some individuals became farmers, others traders, artisans, or religious leaders. The coordination of these roles required reliable information. Marks and symbols, initially simple and concrete, began to encode more complex concepts, numbers, types of goods, and eventually abstract ideas. The foundation of writing was laid in these practical, day-to-day needs, a tool for managing society as it became larger, more interdependent, and more structured. In short, the rise of settlements transformed human cognition into administrative action. The need to record, store, and transmit information pushed humans to experiment with symbolic representation in new ways. Writing, in its earliest forms, was born not in a temple or palace, but in the fields, granaries, and workshops of the first villages, a direct response to the practical demands of organized life. It was the first bridge connecting human thought, society, and memory into a durable, transmissible form. As human settlements grew and economies became more complex, the need to record transactions and manage resources became urgent. Around 8000 BCE, in the fertile lands of the Near East, early farmers and traders developed an ingenious solution: clay tokens. These small, shaped objects represent the world's first known accounting system, an early step toward writing that transformed human society. The tokens came in simple geometric shapes: spheres, cones, discs, and cylinders. Each form symbolized a specific commodity or quantity. A cone might represent a unit of grain, a sphere might represent a jar of oil, and a disc might represent a head of livestock. These physical symbols could be grouped, counted, and stored, providing a tangible representation of abstract quantities. In effect, humans had invented the earliest form of material mathematics, a way to calculate and record economic information without relying on memory alone. Tokens were initially small and portable, allowing people to carry or exchange them as proof of ownership or obligation. Over time, they became more standardized, reflecting a shared system of understanding within communities. A trader could give another community member a cone-shaped token and know that its meaning would be universally understood. This standardization represents one of the earliest examples of conventionalized communication, a critical prerequisite for the emergence of writing. Around 3500 BCE, a major innovation occurred. Tokens were pressed into soft clay and stored inside hollow clay envelopes called bulli. These envelopes acted as containers and receipts, holding the tokens as a guarantee of the contents they represented. The impressions made on the outside of the bulli became visible records, allowing transactions to be verified without opening the envelope. This simple idea, replacing physical tokens with their impressions, marked a critical step toward true writing. The concept of using a mark to represent an object rather than the object itself was revolutionary. The significance of these tokens extends beyond bookkeeping. They reflect the human capacity to abstract reality, converting tangible objects into symbols that could be manipulated, stored, and transmitted. In effect, tokens represent a mental and cultural leap, bridging the concrete world of goods and the abstract world of signs. They allowed humans to externalize memory, freeing thought from the constraints of human recall and laying the cognitive foundation for full scripts. Tokens were also deeply social. They enabled trust, accountability, and cooperation in increasingly complex communities. By standardizing representations of goods and transactions, they allowed settlements to function more efficiently, facilitated trade between communities, and strengthened social cohesion. In this way, tokens were not just economic tools, they were instruments of civilization itself. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Jarmo, Catalhoyuk, and Uruk demonstrates the widespread use of tokens across the ancient Near East. Their shapes evolved over centuries, reflecting changes in commodities, trade practices, and administrative needs. While simple in appearance, each token carried the weight of human ingenuity, the first deliberate attempt to capture information in material form. Ultimately, the token system illustrates the direct line from human necessity to invention. What began as a practical tool for tracking goods gradually evolved into a symbolic system, setting the stage for the development of cuneiform and other early writing systems. Tokens show that writing did not emerge in isolation, it was the natural response of humans facing increasingly complex social, economic, and administrative challenges. In short, tokens represent humanity's first conscious attempt to encode reality, the initial steps toward creating a durable record of thought. They are the precursors to writing, a bridge from concrete objects to abstract symbols, from memory-dependent societies to civilizations capable of recording their own history. By around 3500 BCE, in the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, the world witnessed one of the most transformative leaps in human history, the evolution of tokens into clay tablets. In the ancient city of Uruk, one of the earliest true urban centers, scribes and administrators began pressing marks into clay, creating durable records that would outlast individual memory and even empires. This period marks the birth of writing as a tool of civilization. At first, the transition was pragmatic. Tokens, while useful, had limitations. They could be lost, stolen, or miscounted. The innovation was to press the shapes of tokens directly into soft clay, creating an impression that recorded the transaction. These impressions could be stored safely, baked for permanence, and verified without requiring the physical token itself. Over time, scribes realized that the impressions alone could represent goods, quantities, and concepts, eliminating the need for the original tokens altogether. This simple but profound idea was the seed of cuneiform writing. The earliest tablets were pictographic, meaning they used small drawings to represent objects, a fish, a jar, or a head of cattle. Over decades and centuries, these pictograms gradually became stylized and abstract, evolving into wedge-shaped marks made with a reed stylus. The term cuneiform derives from the Latin cuneus, meaning wedge, reflecting the distinctive shape of these impressions. The transformation from token impressions to pictograms to abstract symbols illustrates the process of simplification and standardization that writing underwent in response to human needs. Cuneiform was initially a tool of administration, used to manage grain distribution, track livestock, and record labor obligations. Yet its potential quickly expanded. The ability to record information in a permanent, transportable form allowed Sumerian leaders to govern more effectively, enforce laws, and coordinate projects like irrigation systems that spanned multiple settlements. Writing became a medium not just for counting but for organizing complex societies. The Sumerians also began to experiment with phonetic representation, a critical breakthrough in the evolution of writing. While early pictograms could represent tangible objects, abstract ideas or spoken language could not be easily captured. By using the sounds of words associated with symbols, scribes could convey more nuanced messages. For example, a symbol for read could be read phonetically to represent a word sounding like read, allowing the written system to encode both objects and ideas. This development laid the foundation for fully functional language in written form. The social role of scribes became central to this revolution. Literacy was highly specialized, only trained scribes could read and write cuneiform. They worked in temple complexes, administrative centers, and palaces, recording everything from trade agreements to religious offerings. Their work ensured continuity and accountability in an increasingly complex society. The profession of the scribe represents one of the earliest examples of knowledge as a specialized craft, giving certain individuals the power to preserve and transmit information across generations. The impact of this innovation cannot be overstated. Tablets allowed Sumerians to extend governance, culture, and memory beyond human limits. Orders could be sent to distant cities, contracts could be enforced across time, and ideas could survive long after their creators. What began as a practical solution to counting and resource management gradually transformed into a tool for literature, law, and administration. In essence, the evolution from tokens to tablets marks the Sumerian Revolution, the moment when humans moved from using objects to represent reality, to creating symbols capable of recording thought itself. It was a critical step toward civilization, one that ensured that human knowledge could be documented, preserved, and shared, forming the foundation of history as we know it. While the earliest Sumerian tablets recorded objects and numbers, the limitations of pictograms soon became apparent. A drawing of a jar could represent a jar, a fish could represent a fish, but what about abstract concepts, actions, or names? How could one record ideas like love, justice, or build? The answer lay in a revolutionary breakthrough, the phonetic principle, the use of symbols to represent sounds rather than just objects. This innovation would allow writing to fully capture spoken language, transforming it into a flexible, expressive system capable of recording any thought. The phonetic principle emerged gradually. Sumerian scribes noticed that certain objects shared sounds with words for other concepts. This insight led to the rebus principle: a symbol could represent not only the thing it depicted but any word that sounded similar. For example, a pictogram of a reed could be read as the syllable gi, allowing scribes to write words with no direct visual representation. By combining these phonetic symbols, they could approximate entire phrases and sentences, moving from concrete to abstract expression. This development was more than a technical innovation, it represented a profound cognitive leap. To use a symbol phonetically requires understanding the concept and its sound, as well as the social agreement that this symbol represents a sound rather than just an object. It demanded a high level of abstraction and the ability to translate thought into conventional signs, a skill that transformed writing from a system of record-keeping into a medium of communication capable of expressing the full range of human experience. The phonetic principle also had profound social implications. With the ability to encode speech, scribes could record names, titles, and personal messages, extending the reach of administrative power. Letters could be sent between cities, treaties could be written and preserved, and laws could be codified with precision. Writing became an instrument of governance and diplomacy, no longer limited to accounting or inventory. The phonetic system allowed messages to survive far beyond the lifetime of the messenger, creating continuity in both administration and culture. Moreover, the phonetic approach enabled the recording of literature and complex ideas. Epic tales, hymns, prayers, and myths could now be written down, preserving stories that would otherwise be lost to time. One of the earliest examples is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which began as a collection of Sumerian poems and gradually coalesced into a narrative thanks to advances in phonetic writing. By linking symbols to sounds, scribes could represent dialogue, abstract concepts, and poetic devices, opening the door to history, philosophy, and literature. The phonetic principle also facilitated linguistic expansion. Neighboring cultures, such as the Akkadians, adapted cuneiform to their own Semitic language, demonstrating the system's flexibility. A writing system based on sound could be modified and borrowed, unlike purely pictographic scripts that were tied to a single language or culture. This adaptability helped spread literacy, trade, and culture across Mesopotamia and beyond, influencing civilizations for millennia. In short, the birth of the phonetic principle transformed writing from a tool of accounting into a vehicle for human thought. It enabled humans to encode, transmit, and preserve spoken language, capturing ideas that went far beyond tangible objects. With this innovation, writing became a living system, one capable of expressing abstract concepts, preserving culture, and building the foundation for civilization's intellectual achievements. The phonetic principle represents a defining moment in human history, the point at which writing ceased to be a record of the material world and became a mirror of human consciousness, capable of capturing the richness, nuance, and complexity of speech itself. The invention of writing created not just a tool but an entire profession, the scribe. Literacy in early Mesopotamia was specialized, requiring years of training, practice, and memorization. Scribes were entrusted with the sacred responsibility of recording human activity, managing resources, and preserving knowledge. They were, in effect, the keepers of memory, the bridge between individual thought and the collective continuity of civilization. Becoming a scribe was no small feat. Young students, often from privileged families or temple communities, spent years learning to read and write cuneiform. They practiced on clay tablets, copying symbols meticulously, mastering hundreds of signs, and memorizing phonetic values. The work demanded discipline, patience, and precision, as even minor mistakes could change the meaning of a record. In many ways, scribes were both administrators and intellectuals, holding a position of social and cultural influence unmatched in their time. Scribes served multiple roles within early urban societies. In the temples and palaces of Sumer, they managed complex bureaucracies, recording temple offerings, tax collections, and labor obligations. They tracked grain storage, livestock, and trade, ensuring that resources were accounted for and disputes minimized. By doing so, they enabled societies to function efficiently, even as populations grew and economies became increasingly sophisticated. But their role went beyond administration. Scribes preserved laws, treaties, and royal decrees, giving permanence to governance. Legal codes, such as the Code of Ur-Nammu, were recorded on tablets to ensure fairness and continuity across generations. Scribes also recorded religious texts, hymns, and prayers, linking the spiritual and temporal realms. By capturing both mundane and sacred knowledge, scribes became custodians of culture, shaping how societies remembered their past and envisioned their future. The work of scribes also reflects the interplay between literacy and power. Those who controlled writing could control information, document authority, and transmit orders across distance and time. A scribe's tablet could enforce a king's command, record a contract between traders, or memorialize a temple offering. Literacy was a tool of administration and influence, and scribes wielded it as an essential instrument of civilization. Beyond governance, scribes enabled the birth of literature and intellectual thought. Epic tales, mythologies, and historical narratives were committed to clay, preserving human imagination for millennia. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest known works of literature, could not have survived without scribes to record, copy, and transmit it. Scribes also facilitated scientific observation, astronomical calculations, and mathematical innovations, providing a foundation for knowledge systems that would endure long after the cities that created them had faded. The social importance of scribes extended to education as well. Sumerian schools trained new generations of scribes, creating a culture of learning and intellectual continuity. Through these institutions, knowledge about administration, law, literature, and religion could be transmitted systematically, ensuring that civilization did not depend solely on oral memory or fleeting human presence. In essence, scribes were the lifeblood of early cities. They connected people to the abstract concept of written memory, transformed ephemeral human thought into permanent records, and allowed societies to expand beyond the limitations of individual recall. Without scribes, the monumental achievements of early civilization, from governance to literature, would have been fragile, temporary, and largely lost to time. The emergence of the scribe marks a critical point in history, the moment when human societies recognized the power of recorded knowledge. Through their hands, clay became a canvas for law, literature, and administration. Through their work, civilizations could preserve themselves, extend influence across generations, and achieve complexity far beyond what oral memory alone could sustain. The invention of writing did more than preserve knowledge, it consolidated power. In early Mesopotamia, literacy was concentrated in the hands of a few, scribes, priests, and rulers. The ability to record, transmit, and control information gave these individuals unprecedented influence over society. Writing became a tool not just for administration, but for governance, law, and social hierarchy, a force that could shape the structure and destiny of civilization. City-states such as Ur, Uruk, and Lagash relied on written records to assert authority. Kings and temple leaders used tablets to document taxes, tribute, and labor obligations, ensuring compliance even across distance. A tablet recording a shipment of grain or livestock carried the authority of the state. Refusal to honor its instructions could result in punishment. In this way, writing extended the power of rulers and administrators far beyond what spoken orders alone could achieve. Legal codes illustrate the relationship between writing and authority. The Code of Ur-Nammu, one of the earliest known legal systems, was inscribed on clay tablets and distributed throughout the region. By committing law to writing, leaders ensured consistency and permanence. Citizens could no longer claim ignorance. The written word made law fixed, impartial, and enforceable. Writing was not neutral, it defined rules, enforced social norms, and legitimized authority. Writing also shaped religion, a cornerstone of early civilizations. Temples employed scribes to record offerings, ritual schedules, and divine decrees. Religious texts codified beliefs, ensuring that rituals were performed correctly and that temples maintained economic and spiritual influence. In this sense, writing became a conduit for divine authority, linking earthly power with the sacred. The scribe's pen wielded both administrative and spiritual influence, shaping not only governance but the moral and cultural order. Trade and diplomacy were equally transformed by writing. Merchants used tablets to document transactions, record debts, and formalize contracts. This reduced disputes and created trust in complex economies. Correspondence between cities could be written, sealed, and transported, allowing political alliances and commercial networks to flourish. Writing amplified human organization, enabling cities to function efficiently at scales unimaginable in oral-only societies. But the power of writing extended beyond material and administrative control, it also shaped memory and history. Leaders could inscribe their victories, monumental constructions, or genealogies on clay and stone. In doing so, they controlled the narrative, influencing how future generations would remember them. Writing was a tool of legacy, a means to assert influence beyond one's lifetime, reinforcing social hierarchies and cultural values. Even within society, literacy was a gatekeeping mechanism. Those who could read and write, typically scribes or elite administrators, held knowledge inaccessible to the majority. Control over writing meant control over information, law, and religious practice. It created educated elite, capable of shaping policies, commerce, and ideology. In essence, writing became a form of institutional power, embedding authority into symbols themselves. The emergence of writing as power demonstrates a fundamental truth: knowledge is authority, and the ability to preserve and transmit that knowledge is transformative. From record-keeping to law, religion to diplomacy, writing allowed humans to extend influence across space and time, creating structures of civilization that could endure far beyond any single individual. In short, writing was more than communication, it was a technology of control, a means by which societies could govern themselves, codify behavior, and shape memory. It was through writing that humans first harnessed the abstract power of symbols to structure civilization itself, laying the foundation for everything from governance to culture, from law to literature. While Sumer is credited with the first true writing system, the human impulse to record and communicate soon emerged independently in other parts of the world. Writing was not a singular invention confined to Mesopotamia, it was a response to the universal human need to preserve memory, organize society, and transmit knowledge across generations. Examining these early systems reveals both the diversity and ingenuity of ancient civilizations. In Egypt, writing emerged around 3200 BCE in the form of hieroglyphs. Like cuneiform, hieroglyphs began as pictorial representations of objects and actions, initially used for administrative and ritual purposes. Temple and tomb inscriptions recorded offerings, royal decrees, and sacred texts, ensuring continuity of religious and political life. Over time, the Egyptians developed more abstract and cursive forms of writing, such as hieratic, enabling more efficient record-keeping. Hieroglyphs became a tool of statecraft and spiritual authority, documenting both the material and symbolic dimensions of Egyptian civilization. In the Indus Valley, around 2600 BCE, seals and inscriptions show a sophisticated system of symbols, often associated with trade, property, or ritual practice. Although these symbols remain deciphered, their existence suggests a complex communication system embedded in daily life. Unlike cuneiform or hieroglyphs, the Indus script appears highly standardized, indicating administrative coordination and possibly a shared literacy among merchants and elites. The presence of these symbols across cities such as Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa points to regional connectivity and economic complexity. In China, writing emerged around 1200 BCE, recorded on oracle bones used for divination. Questions about harvests, weather, and military campaigns were carved into turtle shells and ox scapulae, and then interpreted through the cracks formed by heating. This early Chinese writing combined practical administration with spiritual guidance, linking human decision-making to cosmic forces. From these inscriptions evolved logographic characters, forming the basis of a writing system still in use today, demonstrating remarkable continuity over millennia. Other early writing systems also reflect human adaptation to local needs and environments. In Mesoamerica, the Maya script developed thousands of years later, combining pictographs and phonetic symbols to record history, astronomy, and ritual practices. Similarly, early scripts in Anatolia, such as Hittite hieroglyphs, adapted writing to local political and religious contexts. Across the globe, writing arose wherever humans faced the challenges of recording complex social, economic, or spiritual information. Despite differences in form and medium, these early scripts share common principles: abstraction, standardization, and the capacity to encode both concrete and abstract ideas. They represent a universal human realization, that memory alone is fragile, and that symbols can extend the reach of thought across time and space. Whether pressed into clay, carved in stone, or painted on bone, writing enabled humans to preserve their culture, organize their societies, and communicate across generations. The emergence of writing across different civilizations also highlights the interplay of necessity and creativity. In Mesopotamia, it was accounting and administration; in Egypt it was religious ritual and governance; in China it was divination and decision-making; in the Indus Valley it was commerce and urban coordination. Each system arose independently, yet each fulfilled the same fundamental function: to record, communicate, and preserve knowledge. In conclusion, writing was not a single invention but a global human achievement, reflecting the ingenuity and adaptability of early civilizations. It allowed humans to transcend memory, codify law, preserve culture, and transmit ideas across generations. From Sumer to Egypt to the Indus Valley to China, the invention of writing reshaped human history, enabling societies to organize, endure, and reflect upon themselves in ways that were previously impossible. With writing firmly established as a tool for administration, trade, and ritual, early civilizations began to use it to capture stories, beliefs, and laws, producing some of humanity's first great texts. These documents were more than records; they were expressions of culture, identity, and thought, revealing how societies understood themselves and their place in the world. In Mesopotamia, the earliest literary masterpieces emerged from the scribes of Sumer. Among these, the Epic of Gilgamesh stands as a monumental achievement. Initially recorded on clay tablets in cuneiform around 2100 BCE, the epic recounts the adventures of Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, exploring themes of friendship, mortality, and the search for immortality. Beyond its narrative, the text reflects complex social values, religious beliefs, and philosophical inquiry, demonstrating that writing had become a medium for human imagination and reflection, not just administration. Legal texts also represent some of the earliest written works with enduring influence. The Code of Ur-Nammu, dating to around 2100 BCE, and the later Code of Hammurabi in Babylon, codified laws governing family life, commerce, labor, and punishment. These texts illustrate the use of writing to create societal order, enshrining justice and social norms in a permanent form. By committing laws to clay, rulers ensured continuity, transparency, and authority, making writing a mechanism of governance and fairness. In Egypt, early texts preserved religious and funerary knowledge. The pyramid texts, inscribed on the walls of tombs around 2400 BCE, were a collection of spells, hymns, and prayers designed to ensure the king's journey to the afterlife. Writing here served both practical and spiritual purposes; it guided ritual, reinforced the divine authority of the pharaoh, and preserved religious traditions for future generations. These texts demonstrate the dual function of writing as a tool of material administration and metaphysical preservation. In the Indus Valley, while undeciphered, the inscriptions on seals and tablets suggest early communication of commercial and administrative information, possibly linked to trade, property, or religious practice. Though the meaning remains elusive, these texts reflect the importance of writing as a medium of coordination and identity within urban centers. Across these early civilizations, the first great texts reveal several key features. They encode collective memory, preserving knowledge, laws, stories, and beliefs. They standardize information, allowing complex societies to function efficiently and consistently. They also extend the reach of human thought, enabling ideas to survive beyond individual lifespans. In every case, these texts represent a conscious effort to capture the intangible, stories, rules, and beliefs, in a tangible form. The creation of these texts also signifies a cultural shift. Writing was no longer confined to the practical realms of counting and record-keeping, it had become a medium of expression, reflection, and identity. Societies began to see themselves as entities with history, tradition, and vision, capable of transmitting knowledge and values across generations. Through the first great texts, humanity began to write its own memory, turning fleeting thoughts into enduring symbols. In essence, the first great texts mark the culmination of the early stages of writing. They reveal the power of the written word to preserve civilization, encode morality, explore human experience, and communicate across time. From epics to laws, hymns to administrative records, these early works laid the foundation for literature, law, religion, and history, shaping the intellectual and cultural landscape of the ancient world. By the end of the 3rd millennium BCE, writing had firmly established itself as one of humanity's most transformative inventions. From humble marks on clay and stone, writing had evolved into a system capable of preserving history, governing complex societies, and expressing human thought. Its legacy extends far beyond the first tablets and inscriptions, shaping the very foundations of civilization. Writing allowed human societies to transcend time and space. Whereas oral tradition is limited to memory and immediate communication, written records could survive centuries, even millennia. The administrative tablets of Sumer, the hieroglyphs of Egypt, the oracle bones of China, and the seals of the Indus Valley ensured that knowledge, law, and culture were no longer confined to the lifespan of an individual. Writing created continuity, enabling ideas to be transmitted accurately across generations. In this way, human memory became collective and enduring. The cultural impact of writing is immense. It enabled the codification of law, giving societies a framework for justice and governance. Written law allowed rulers to enforce social norms consistently, reducing reliance on personal authority or oral agreements. Literature, myth, and religious texts emerged, giving voice to human imagination and belief. The written word allowed societies to reflect upon themselves, to record achievements, and to aspire toward ideals. Writing became a mirror in which civilizations could see and shape themselves. Education and knowledge flourished because of writing. With tablets, scrolls, and inscriptions, scribes and scholars could teach systematically, preserve discoveries, and transmit specialized skills. Mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and medicine could be recorded, refined, and expanded over generations. Writing thus became the foundation for intellectual development, enabling humans to accumulate knowledge far beyond what memory alone could sustain. Writing also became a symbol of social hierarchy and power. Literacy was often restricted to a privileged few, scribes, priests, and administrators. Those who controlled writing wielded influence over law, religion, commerce, and culture, shaping both daily life and collective history. The creation, preservation, and interpretation of texts became a means of institutional power, embedding authority into the very medium of communication. Beyond practical administration, writing enabled humans to explore abstract ideas, identity, morality, spirituality, and philosophy. The ability to record complex thought allowed civilizations to develop self-consciousness, to study their past, and to deliberate on the nature of life and society. Writing became not only a tool but a cultural force, shaping how humans thought, organized, and imagined the world. The legacy of writing continues to resonate today. Every book, newspaper, digital text, and historical archive is a descendant of those first marks in clay and stone. Writing transformed humanity's relationship with knowledge, memory, and culture, allowing ideas to outlive their creators and influence generations far removed in time and space. It is the bridge between thought and permanence, between human cognition and collective memory. In conclusion, the invention of writing marks one of humanity's most profound achievements. From the earliest tokens of Mesopotamia to the complex scripts of Egypt, China, and beyond, writing enabled humans to record, preserve, and transmit knowledge, creating the foundation for civilization itself. Its power lies not merely in communication but in its ability to shape society, culture, and thought, leaving an enduring legacy that continues to define human history. Writing is, in every sense, the memory of civilization, the medium through which humans preserve the past, structure the present, and imagine the future. It is the triumph of abstraction over impermanence, of permanence over the fleeting nature of speech, and of collective memory over individual fragility, a gift that has allowed humanity to think across millennia. Around 1500 BCE, along the eastern Mediterranean coast in the region of modern-day Lebanon and Syria, the Phoenicians emerged as a powerful maritime civilization. Unlike large empires such as Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Phoenicians were city-states, including Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos, known for their maritime trade, skilled craftsmanship, and cultural innovation. Their economic influence was immense. Phoenician ships carried goods such as timber, glass, purple dye, and luxury items throughout the Mediterranean, connecting distant civilizations through commerce. Phoenician society was highly urbanized and commercial, creating practical demands for record-keeping, correspondence, and administration. Merchants needed to track shipments, record transactions, and authenticate contracts, while rulers sought to maintain coherent governance across city-states and colonies. This environment provided the fertile ground for one of history's most significant innovations, the creation of a phonetic alphabet. Unlike complex writing systems of the time, Mesopotamian cuneiform with hundreds of symbols or Egyptian hieroglyphs with hundreds of pictographs, the Phoenician system was simple, flexible, and efficient. It reduced writing to roughly 22 consonantal symbols, each representing a sound rather than a word or syllable. This phonetic approach allowed users to represent spoken language directly, enabling rapid learning and widespread use, particularly for trade and communication across the Mediterranean. The simplicity of the Phoenician alphabet also encouraged its adaptability. Symbols were abstract, easy to carve into wood, stone, or metal, and could be applied to different languages. Phoenician merchants and settlers carried the script to Cyprus, Crete, and North Africa, where it influenced local writing systems. Its exportability made the alphabet one of the first truly universal writing systems, bridging linguistic and cultural divides. Culturally, the Phoenicians used writing not just for commerce but also for administration and identity. Seals, inscriptions, and dedicatory texts recorded ownership, religious offerings, and official decrees. Writing codified both practical and symbolic aspects of society, linking economic activity, civic authority, and cultural expression. The Phoenician alphabet's impact is enormous. It became the foundation for the early Hebrew, Arabic and Greek alphabets, which added vowels and allowed the recording of complex language and literature. From Greece, the alphabet spread to the Romans, who created the Latin script, the ancestor of most modern Western alphabets. The Phoenician innovation demonstrates a key principle: writing evolves not only to record language but to meet the practical, social, and cultural needs of society. In essence, the Phoenicians transformed writing from a complex, elite skill into a portable, learnable, and widely applicable technology, enabling literacy, trade, and communication to flourish across the ancient Mediterranean. Their alphabet laid the foundation for the global spread of literacy, connecting civilizations and leaving a legacy that continues to influence modern writing systems today. The Phoenician alphabet, developed around 1050 BCE, represents one of the most ingenious innovations in human history. Unlike earlier writing systems that relied on hundreds of symbols, such as Mesopotamian cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphs or the undeciphered Indus Valley symbols, the Phoenician script consisted of roughly 22 characters, each representing a consonantal sound. This simplicity made the system efficient, adaptable, and remarkably easy to learn, a feature that would enable its widespread adoption and influence over future writing systems. Each Phoenician symbol corresponded to a single phoneme. For example, the symbol Aleph represented a glottal stop, while Beth represented B sound, and Gimel, G sound. Importantly, vowels were not explicitly written, which made the alphabet consonant-based or abjad-like. Readers inferred vowels from context, a technique that worked well in Semitic languages and allowed the alphabet to be compact and fast to write. The characters themselves were abstract and stylized, designed for carving into stone, stamping on clay, or writing on parchment and papyrus. Unlike pictographic scripts, where symbols directly depicted objects or ideas, Phoenician letters were symbolic representations of sounds, reflecting a major shift toward phonetic thinking. This abstraction was the key to the alphabet's flexibility. The same set of symbols could be adapted to different languages, an innovation that set the stage for the global spread of alphabetic writing. The writing system was typically written from right to left, a convention that persists in some Semitic languages today. Phoenician scribes wrote on various materials depending on the purpose. Monumental inscriptions used stone, commercial and administrative texts often employed clay or papyrus, and correspondence sometimes used leather or wood. The versatility of the medium combined with the simplicity of the script enabled the alphabet to travel across regions with traders and settlers, spreading ideas and literacy. Beyond practicality, the Phoenician alphabet also served cultural and symbolic purposes. Letters were inscribed on seals, votive offerings, and tombstones, reflecting not just communication but identity, ownership, and religious devotion. Writing codified aspects of civic, economic, and spiritual life, embedding the alphabet within the social fabric of Phoenician city-states. The innovation of abstract phonetic symbols marked a fundamental shift in human thought about writing. By moving from representing ideas or objects to representing sounds, the Phoenicians created a more efficient bridge between speech and text. This innovation enabled literacy to expand beyond specialized scribes, as learning 22 symbols was far easier than mastering hundreds of cuneiform or hieroglyphic characters. In essence, the structure of the Phoenician alphabet, its consonantal principle, stylized symbols, and adaptability, was designed for practical efficiency, portability, and cross-cultural utility. This combination of simplicity and versatility explains why it became the ancestor of the Greek, Latin, and Arabic scripts. The alphabet was not merely a tool for recording words, it was a technological and cultural breakthrough that enabled the spread of literacy, commerce, and civilization itself.